Welcome everyone to the Game Dev Discussion Podcast. This is episode 51, and we've got quite a special one this time. We've got two returning guests. We've got James Ritossa, surfacing artist at 343, and lead surfacing artist Rogelio Olguin from 343. How we doing, gents?
Very good. Thank you, Alex.
Yeah, good.
And I appreciate you guys coming back on. I know both of your podcasts were some of the fun ones, especially as a materials artist myself. It's fun talking to you guys. This is going to be an interesting conversation because I sort of want to. I'll sort of set the premise now. I've been spending a lot of time recently looking at different workflows for designer, and I want to get both of your thoughts on this particular problem I'm having.
Sure.
I have learned designer and grew up with designer with the whole 100% designer in my head. I've always worked like that. I've always tried to solve the problems in designer. Recently, looking at using ZBrush to make a bunch of assets and then doing like a simulation to make a rubble pile, or leveraging photo scans because most stuff you can make. If you try to make a leaf in designer, it's just not going to hold up to what you can make in like a ZBrush or a with a photo scan. And I felt kind of wrong. It felt like I was cheating or something like that. And when I've spoken to someone like I spoke to Ben Wilson about this, and he was banging his head against the wall because it's a ridiculous notion for me to think this is an odd thing and I shouldn't be doing it. And I know it's ridiculous, but I was curious to get your guys' take on this, because especially in production as well.
Yeah, I mean, when it comes to production, mainly, like anything goes. It's just about getting the job done, really, right? I mean, there are parts where I'm like, oh yeah, using scans here and there kind of gets me, but at the same time, it really is about getting the job done. I mean, I'm not gonna make something that's terribly hard because it's gonna take me either a whole week or something. It's something that I really just need to get done on the day. Like let's say some kind of grass or like leaf piles and stuff like that. And like I know that I could probably get there, but it's more or less like I'd rather just get it done quickly, and if I have scans available, I'll just get it done. But it depends on timing. It also depends on kind of like personal pride at the moment, what you really want to do. But it also, especially in production, it really just depends on that scheduling.
Yeah, and
I mean, go on.
Yeah, so I mean, a similar thing for me, like an example, I guess, is it's not exactly like ZBrush and Substance, but more along the lines of just like with doing some of the hard surface like sci-fi panels that I've done in the past for my art station. Like they'll take anywhere from like 20 to 40 hours to make a good looking sci-fi panel. Whereas like that's something that I'll do in my free time just for kind of fun and seeing how far I can push designer. But
Yeah.
when I'm at work, like if it would only take an hour to model in like, Blender or something, like there's no reason not to use Blender, right? And the thing that really matters most when you're in production is making sure that you're going to hit your deadlines and that you're going to have a quality product that you're putting out. And I don't think that anyone would ever judge you for not making something 100% in designer. The thing that you probably would be judged for is if you're not meeting those deadlines. But for your portfolio, I think that it's a perfectly fine thing to do because, I mean, it is your portfolio after all.
But do you think that's where it's difficult for us? Like we make stuff because we want to make it. We're testing the limits of our skills. Like when you make these crazy sci-fi stuff, or really the same with these ornate things.
Mhm.
It's like you're not doing it because it's like, oh, this is the best way to do this. You could make that in ZBrush or in Blender, like you said, in 10 minutes.
Sure.
The point of it is always it's you just testing your professional limits and just seeing what you can do and exploring. The issue comes in, I suppose, people look to that. And I've had young artists message me, and I imagine both you do the exact same.
Mhm.
In that saying, oh, is this what I need to do to get into the industry? I need like all this crazy stuff. And I'm like, no, not really. Like this stuff, nearly I'd say like out of all the map boards I have on my art station, I'd say only 10% of them are like actually suitable to a production. The rest of them are like the time it took to make versus how quick I could have made them somewhere else. It's like this is just not like viable. I mean, have you seen that? Artists look into what material art portfolios on ArtStation thinking, oh, that's what I need. I need lots of crazy map balls, which isn't really
Yeah,
the case.
yeah. I mean, it really depends. It's like one of the best examples is that always comes in mind is that Baroque ceiling, which is amazing. God, I keep forgetting the artist.
Jonathan
Jonathan.
Benedos.
Jonathan,
Yeah.
Potatoes, freaking amazing, right? And obviously an amazing artist. I know that in production he probably wouldn't do that. He would just probably get try to do the best result within the time because he's a production minded person. He's built a good career, etc. But that's his flexing, you know. And we all have our material that we're like, oh, we're gonna flex and stuff like that. But there's no way that I would spend time on some of that stuff here and there. And eventually, if you're building that kind of stuff for a while, then you do get a sense for it, and then you start getting some kind of like templates. So at
Yeah.
some point, maybe the first one you built was like the insanely hard one. So it depends, right? If you're gonna build like a whole palace, then and it's gonna be around a similar style, you're gonna be reusing those little tidbits that are inside of it and tools that you built to make that. Then it becomes an actual production resource, right? So it really
Yeah.
depends on how you want to use it and how you want to approach it. But you could have approached it in so many multiple ways. Like one way that I would approach it is like, yeah, well, I'm just gonna build them in ZBrush, get all these little pieces together. Either start them in Maya, bring them to ZBrush, sculpt them a little bit. Bake down the alphas, make sure they're 16-bit, etc., and pipe them through. And that makes my life easier, and it's a little bit more controlled and all that stuff. But you can choose to do it from the get-go, from just substance. It really doesn't truly matter. It's more what matters is just getting to the end result. But in both cases, I would have resources that I made, you know.
Yeah.
So it just depends on there's so many multiple ways of skinning a cat, I guess you can say, or something like that.
I think the phrase goes something like that.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah, poor cats. But either way, it's one of those things. As a material artist, I think we get, especially nowadays, because there's so many almost like you become part of the almost ad campaign or something. I don't know what you call it, but you become so enthralled with like, oh, I'm a substance guy, or I'm a Quixel guy, or I'm a whatever guy.
It gets tribalistic.
Yeah, it gets very tribalistic, and it's kind of weird. It's fine for what you use. It's what you feel comfortable with. And there's moments that I've definitely jumped into like, hey, I'm going to start this at a modeling stage, or I'm going to, this would probably be a good ZBrush thing, or in some crazy times, I'll use Crazy Bump. But that's like something that I'm like, I just need a moss, and I'm just gonna pop it in. And I talked about that one last one, if you guys remember. But it's basically it's a simple thing. Sometimes in production you just need the quick answer for the moment. It doesn't. What matters is how it looks as a whole, right?
Yeah, of
Um,
course.
and going back to what the material artist strengths is having the ability to be flexible, and being able to understand where are the limitations and where you need to, where you need to go to make it fast, but also make it at a high quality.
Well, that's kind of like why I find it interesting doing these other workflows. Is like, okay, this is actually. So at first I was like, okay, this isn't gonna look as good as if I did this 100% design now. Like if I did this 100% design, I would have been way better. But now I'm like, actually, this is pretty stronger for me as an artist and I suppose a portfolio, because you can sort of go, hey, I'm showing that I know that the ZBrush method taken into design that's far quicker than me making this all in designer.
Mm-hmm.
And it's kind of almost going full 360 rather than the 100% design as almost now as I'm like getting more experience, is almost a negative,
Yeah.
because the way I see it is, I'm like, if you made 100% designer, you're not even thinking about what the designer, what fallbacks are. Like one of my old ones, the space pad materials. Fabric's kind of a ball ache to do in designer. Like it's just annoying. When you have something like marvelous designer, which James, I know I got the idea from you. Having someone like
Yeah.
marvelous designer at your disposal, it's like it's a no brainer. Like if you're not using it, you're not aware of the limitations of your tools.
The funny thing about that too is that that whole thing I actually started as a joke. Because
Oh, really?
at the time I was actually a hard surface artist, so I was doing mostly modeling of like hard surface stuff. Like I was working on vehicles at Avalanche, and I'd model
Mm.
weapons, and I started kind of dabbling in designer, and I was like, this is like really stupid how people are doing sci-fi materials in designer, because you can just model them. And I was like, so what would be the most ridiculous thing to do? And I was like, well, maybe if I made the hard surface in designer and make the fabric in an external program like Marvelous, that would be hilarious. And so
Yeah.
that's actually how that got started, because it started off as just a complete joke, and then everyone seemed to like it a lot, so I was just like, oh well, I guess it's sort of a kind of viable workflow, and so I just kept on doing it. um,
It's
and
interesting because Marvelous does have like
Yeah.
a distinct style, doesn't it? Like the types of creases it gives. Like when I see the bakes, I'm like, I don't know. You could see a marvelous simulation
yeah,
for
I mean,
one.
I
Not in a
think
bad way.
it's,
You can just see it.
I mean, usually when I see it, it's like it's almost like that level that's like I know that a human didn't make this. Like I know it's sort of a
Yes.
simulation, and I actually view that as both a positive and a negative thing, because like it's almost on the same lines to me as like a raw photo scan. In like,
Mm,
you can get a raw photo scan and it'll look like real life, but it's just missing that extra, like, it's missing the salt, the thing that makes it really good. um
mm,
Mm.
and so like you can really tell when someone's a talented artist, because like they'll take that raw photo scan or that raw simulation and they'll bring it into ZBrush to process it, or they'll bring in like that photo scan material into Substance Painter, like some of the Far Cry guys did, and process it in there, and it'll get like a really amazing look to it, because you're
whoa.
getting both the best of real life and you're getting like that slightly sort of like stylized look that only an
Yeah.
artist can give.
The secret about basically anything artistic is not letting it be seen how it was done.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like magic. You don't want it's not showing you don't show how you created the magic, right? How you made the magic trick. If they could figure it out, then you just haven't done your job correctly. Honestly.
I think that's one of the big. It's funny because James Lucas said this when he came on the podcast. There's a weird, so there's still like a weird stigma around megascans and photo scans in the industry. People still either don't like it or think it's bad or it's negative. And I think, and I've sort of come to realization now. I think that people still forget what megascans is, how you're meant to use megascans. When James came on, he was like, "Yeah, no one is meant to take a megascan and use it out of the box. You have to take it, you have to edit it, take it to the
Hmm.
mixer, make it your own, do something with it because out of the box, it's raw data essentially."
Exactly.
And I was like, okay, so people are like, there's a lot of people on on social media who are like, oh, mega scans is bad for the industry, it's blah blah blah, and I'm like, wait, this is the exact same conversation as when Substance Painter came around. Oh, all people know how to do
Exactly.
is slap smart materials on, and then the exact
And
same
ZBrush.
conversation. Yeah, ZBrush as well. Yeah, exactly. And it's like it's just the same conversation. It's
Yeah.
you could spot a Megascans, like a student, for example, who's just grabbed a bunch of Megascans and dropped them into Unreal. You spot, as a like a professional, you spot a mile off because like the composition's all wrong, the lighting's wrong, it just doesn't make sense. But when you see a photo scan scene done, like a Megascan scene done well, where like people have took the assets and modified them and made them work and do their due diligence with it, it's like they're amazing pieces of work. Just like with Painter, you could spot when someone's just slapped on bronze armor or someone's just slapped on, machine smart materials,
Mm.
or used the generators like the edgeware. Like when you see that on a prop, most production artists can spot that and they're like, okay, you've just used a smart material, cool. But when someone does a material where like you don't see that, it's like, oh, they've took it and made this tool really work for them. Exact same as ZBrush. You could spot when people do, insert meshes everywhere or use JRO stamps everywhere. It's kind of that conversation just it keeps repeating itself. It's going to probably come again, in the next
Oh
tool comes
yeah,
around.
absolutely. I mean, AI is gonna probably be the next thing. Yeah, we were talking about this off the thing,
Yeah.
but yeah, AI and all that kind of stuff will be an interesting take on it, and we'll see where that ends up. You know,
Well, okay, let's do this then. We'll start with James, and then we'll go to Rogelio.
yeah.
James, let's talk about. Let's just. What do you think the net? And we'll limit this to material art because this could blow up in terms of the amount of stuff we could talk about.
Sure.
Let's give it a time frame. Let's say not next gen, the PS5, gen after, so 2 gens.
Mhm.
Sure.
Where do you think material artists will be by then?
So by then, I mean, right now, I think that we're kind of starting to see some of the early phases of like AI being implemented within our material workflows. And
Mm-hmm.
there's like a lot of good examples, whether it's like what some of the guys over at Embark are doing with like a lot of texture synthesis,
Mm-hmm.
or even like what some of the guys over at Artomatics are doing, making some, according to them, it's like a um, deep learning algorithm for fixing tiling issues in textures or whatever they
Mm-hmm.
have. And I also read something recently about a certain studio which is using AI, just like some machine learning algorithm for upresing small resolution
Oh
textures. So
yeah.
you put in a 128 texture into the game, and then
Yeah.
it will upres in real time to 2048, which is insane. So those are like some of the really early things that are starting out right now, and I think over the next couple years, past PS5, going on to PlayStation 6 or whatever, I think that we're going to start seeing a lot more of those sort of methods moving into the mainstream. So, like, one thing which I'm seeing a lot of is using AI for doing denoising on textures. So,
Mm-hmm.
you can imagine how great that would be if you go out, you photo scan something, you run it through some software to denoise the texture and delight it at the same time, and you basically just saved yourself, a few hours worth of processing in Photoshop.
Mhm.
But just with that though, is that's the stuff you're talking about? It's about just making our lives easier. It's not gonna,
Exactly.
it's we're just gonna
Yeah.
make the quality go up. We're gonna make denoising
Yeah.
go. We're gonna make
So
tiling work. Like it's not changing anything too drastic.
Yeah, so what I've kind of noticed is that a lot of these advancements that are being made are mostly things that are tedious for humans to do. So
Mm-hmm.
whether it's something like denoising or delighting, like it's mostly the boring tasks. What's incredibly hard to reproduce is actual like the human artistry behind a texture. So
Yeah.
if you try to train a machine learning algorithm to make a sci-fi panel with cloth in the middle of it, like it would have a really hard time. Um, Making something a little bit more organic, like rocks, which have a little bit more randomness in there, might be a bit easier. But still, like it's that amount of complexity um, in like an AI is so far off, in my opinion. From what I've been reading, it's like I wouldn't expect it for a while now.
Yeah. That's
So
more
like,
like machine learning.
well,
Well, think of it like this though. Like so you can make like you guys have probably all got this. Like if you got like a generic rock base you can use.
Mm.
right,
So for example, I have a graph where like I have lots of framed groups of nodes, and I just copy and paste them out when I need them. So there's like I could have one which is rock, lichen, moss, cracks, and some wind erosion and some water erosion. And I can sort of go, and you imagine if you had an AI where you have this big library of groups of nodes, and you just say, okay, I need, here's a photo. This is Icelandic cliff face.
Mhm.
You're going to need this, this, and this. And the AI goes and grabs them pieces and puts them all together for you. You can see when someone's done that and they haven't gone the extra 2 steps to then bed them together and add the finishing touches.
right,
Oh yeah.
Um, so even if you went that route where like you did actually have machine learning trying to create art and doing the organic stuff or something like that,
mhm,
I think it's still going to be the same case of they will take you so far, and then you need to do your bit. And that'll probably be the full circle we come. So we're talking about with mega scans that people are like, oh, it's just cheating, it's not real. We'll put it to AI learning, and it's like, oh, you're using AI learning to do you think that's not how you do art? It's like, no, but you need still me to come in and make that better.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I know
Uh,
like
yeah. Go
a
ahead.
lot of the stuff that we're seeing right now is mostly from a lot more like simpler algorithms. So like
Mm-hmm.
think of like there's a really good um, sort of talk from Embark Studios on what they're using for doing their texture synthesis, which
Mm-hmm.
basically just really low level is it's like sort of a pixel neighbor technique. So each pixel in a bitmap is compared to a large array of like source files that you feed in. Um,
Okay.
so I won't get into it because I don't remember half of it, and it's also pretty
Yeah.
complex. So it wouldn't make sense if I were to explain it right now. Um, but basically, they're fairly simple algorithms if you were to think of them like a human would. Um, the things that are really complex are the sort of like things that are unknown. Like if I were to ask you, "Hey Alex, what exactly makes rose texture better than a student's texture?" You could probably name out some stuff like, well, rose texture doesn't have any stretching in the height map. He
Mm-hmm.
has really nice color palette choices. Um, but all those things are extremely. It takes a long
Vague.
time for someone like Ro to be able to master those techniques. So to be able to document every detail of what makes those designs successful and then have to transfer that to code is incredibly hard. And that's
Well,
kind
it's
of where
also
machine
subjective.
learning it is
Yeah.
exactly, yeah. And so things like that which are both subjective and complex in nature are really hard to sort of teach a computer if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does
Yeah.
actually.
I mean, I definitely agree. I think it's gonna be more like a tool. It's just like what we're doing now. I think what one of the interesting things that I can see coming is that is something that's very laborious of like doing the scans through is getting several images and sending that to basically the a modeling generating point cloud tool is going to be gone relatively soon. So all that expense and technology to get all those images might not actually be a thing that exists for that long. It could possibly be that you just feed 2 or 3 images. It imagines all the other images in that area, and then based
Mm.
on that, it creates your scan literally in seconds, and then you can go from there. I mean, it's actually not that far off getting to that point. It's just a matter of you know dedication to towards that. And so I think scanning technology is going to be one of those things that I don't know if it's going to necessarily live on that long, and that's kind of a good thing because it's so slow and laborious, you know.
Yeah.
yeah.
I
Um,
think one thing that's quite interesting about it though, and a lot of the time when we have this conversation with people, it's very doomsday. Oh, they're gonna take our jobs, blah blah blah, all that nonsense. And I actually don't think, and you guys correct me if you think I'm wrong. The way I see it is look what designer does and the way you use designer. It's a very programmatic nature in
yeah,
the way it works. If you were someone a ZBrush artist, in the mid 2000s, and you're like, oh, okay, what you're gonna do is you got all these leaves. I'm gonna like scatter these out, so I'm gonna have to copy and paste them, and like move them around and place them and all this sort of stuff. And someone said, oh, actually, no, there's this tool coming out where you just plug a few of them in, and then it will automatically scatter for you, and you can tell it where to go and like how it scatters. And it's like, oh, okay, that's a crazy tool. Like, but that didn't take anyone's jobs. The
Right.
games just got bigger and higher in quality, and
hmm
that's how I feel about any of these big technological leaps. I've spoken to Jeremy about this quite a few times. It's like, and he's one sort of he made this point, and it sort of swayed my opinion a little bit because it's like as our technology gets better, it's not like we're just going to stay in the same bounding box we're in now for games. Games will get bigger and bigger and more complex, and we'll be able
yeah,
to do more things. So no one's so right now. I don't think anyone's jobs are actually like people will talk a lot about. Oh, my job's gonna be gone and I'm not gonna be needed. It's like no, you're still gonna be needed. It might change a little bit. You know, Rogelio, what you were doing in the mid 2000s with ZBrush is completely different to what you do now, or at
Yeah.
least that's me assuming.
Well, I mean, different, yes, but do I use the same skills as an artist?
Yes.
It's still absolutely the same, and it's just
Yeah.
growing, obviously, right? Um, but it's one of those things that's just it's just different tools, you know. Yeah,
But them conversations still
uh,
happen though. Like no one's
yeah.
go. You're not going. You didn't lose your job because designer came around and suddenly the materials artists
No.
jobs was so much easier. It's like no, you just you have to do more now instead of doing one material a week. It's like no, we want 5 materials a week, and it just keeps
Yeah,
growing.
and it's one of the things I actually remember having this conversation with the algorithmic guys. I think specifically Sebastian. Um, and I was like, well, you know, I love your tool. Like, there's no doubt that right now I'm definitely representing your tool. But if there's any other tool that's better, I'm going to jump at it. You know,
Mm.
that's just the truth. Like, I'm an artist. I need to be updating. So you get basically it was a challenge. It's like you guys need to maintain your tool going and and look for the future basically at a constant basis because that's
Okay,
the
what does that look
truth
like though?
for any artist.
So
You know,
on that, that's an interesting point. What does it need to do to keep up then? What's the next step for designer?
yeah, that's I mean, it's an interesting thing. I okay, so I will say that I know things that are definitely not things I should mention. So
Okay,
this
that's
question
cool.
is very, very,
Loaded.
very careful, very loaded specifically.
Well,
Um,
don't get yourself in trouble. Like, so if you
but
want to dodge it,
basically,
then just dodge it.
so I'm not going to completely dodge it. I'm just going to say I think we need to go into areas that they're already kind of dabbling, but they need to make sure uh, that we go, in a better way. I don't like the fact that we have a whole other tool called Alchemist, to be perfectly honest, separated it from
Mm-hmm.
Designer. Like, there's cool stuff in there that should have been just a Designer.
Mm-hmm.
And they're kind of implementing here and there. And so that was one move that I was like, oof, I don't know about that move. That's not cool. Because there's some cool stuff, but the thing is, I'm not going to open up another tool just to that's still kind of an ideation phase. It's just to use it and practice with it. I know people are using it and being quite successful here and there, but it's just another tool base that does like very specific things interestingly, interesting. Not even well yet, I would say.
Yeah.
I haven't seen anything that's like wowed me enough to be like, oh, well, I need to go there, kind of thing. But it has a lot of potential, right? And to me, the move of keeping those tools separate was not something I didn't really feel, right? Um, so at the same time, it's like expand the tools that you have,
Mm.
and grow them in a way that makes sense. It's kind of like ZBrush mentality. It's like every time you get a release, something amazing happens, and they're doing a good job generally, the designer, painter, etc. But I definitely think Alchemist could have been something that could have been much more integrated into designer.
If
Um,
I
but yeah,
think with Alchemist though,
things like that, and that's just a fair critique on their side.
yeah,
And I have mentioned that, but I obviously know some other stuff that I will mention.
yeah, cool.
But yeah, going into those kind of more algorithm type things, are interesting. Developing machine learning is interesting for saving different definite clicks, to help us. Um, finding ways to speed up the process and get us to a quick result, but at the same time that it's artistically driven. And it's all
Mm.
that kind of stuff. I mean, I'm looking forward to a tool that is because Houdini is amazing, right, in many ways, right,
Mm-hmm.
but it's also deeply complex.
Yes.
If they can find a way that Houdini basically makes it, then this is speaking generally as any designer. Just if they can find a tool that is like designer but Houdini, kind of thing that you could make procedural models, and I think that anybody who does that is going to make buck, because I want to make these kind of like all these cobblestones or all these wall pieces, like a Maya building, just put it all together and make it all 3D with very simple node base that we have that's deeply artistically understandable, and nothing that I think where the division of Houdini experts goes is that it becomes very mathematics,
Yeah, it
and it
does.
confuses people, and it takes a long time to learn. While designer, yeah, it can be very technical, but it also it's kind of like it comes with really good condensed tools that just develop over time, and you get much better, you know, a collection at the end. So. Uh, I still haven't seen a tool like that, and I desperately want to have a tool like that for production.
Yeah, I mean, like, algorithmic kind of came around and they sort of revolutionized the texture industry.
Hmm.
And that was like, I mean, I know for me at least, that was the first time that I've seen something like that. And it's the only time that I've sort of seen something like that in this industry. With Blender kind of coming close, it seems like. But like, I haven't really seen like a huge shift in terms of modeling. Like, beyond kind of from what I hear when like ZBrush came out and when Maya first made its appearance. So like I think that it's sort of due time for a big change on the modeling scene, especially when it comes to procedural modeling, because right now Houdini's really the only person on the market with like a proper procedural modeling package. And
Yeah.
like algorithmic just seems sort of, well, Adobe now even more in a
Sure.
prime spot to deliver something on that. So I would love to see what they do for something like that, because I mean it seems like it sort of just perfectly lines up. And I mean designer is, in my opinion, it's really great at what it does, and I wouldn't really want to see all that much change besides, a couple smaller things, like maybe a little bit more robust of a renderer or something.
Dude, have you seen this on rendering? Have you seen have you tried out the PBR render node?
I have. That thing
What do
is
you think?
amazing.
Dude,
I
I
I
showed Anna
love it.
yesterday. I was like, I was setting up some update shots for counterplay. I was trying to get some like update shots for my materials just to like show them what we're doing.
Yeah, yeah,
And I was in Mum's set, and I was like, I remembered someone posted. I can't remember his name, so I'm sorry, but he posted like a blog post of like he updated all his materials with the PBR render node. I was like,
yeah.
huh, he actually did quite a good job of that. So I then opened back up my materials, and I saw playing with the node a little bit, and I was like, oh shit, if I need to get like update shots, like which actually look pretty nice, because you can get like update shot from the 3D viewport, but like it
Right.
just looks a bit shit. But I got some of them from the PBR render node, and I was like, "Oh, this actually looks pretty decent. Like, this is a solid, like, this is a good update shot. I don't need to do anything with this." And I showed Anna, and I was like, "Hey, you need to look at this." And now we're just like, "Okay, all our update shots look the exact same now, but it's like it was a really solid way to do it." And I was like, "Okay, that was a nice change." And I saw it as not okay. If anyone has listened to like the past podcast, they know I've been maybe shitting on Marmoset a bit too much. Um,
It's
but
my
I'm
baby
like,
you're
because
talking about.
dude, I'm so in on Unreal right now. But I was like, okay, the only thing keeping me in Marmoset right now is map balls because I can get transparency and I can't get transparency from Unreal without having to do a bunch of keying and all that sort of stuff.
Sure.
And I was
Mhm.
like, but the PBR render node, like the map ball was really nice. I could light it it's quite flat, so I couldn't do any dramatic lighting. But I was like, this is a solid alternative to Marmoset, even though Marmoset could probably push it that extra like 5%. I was like, this is passable, like
You
more than
know,
passable, and it's going
it's
to get better.
it's funny because you mentioned that. The day that that came out, I remember I I was looking through the documentation on the new release, and I was like, "Oh, what's this?" And I was like, "There's no way that this actually works well." And so I placed the node in Designer, and I just dragged one of my tile materials onto it, and I was like, "Oh my god, they did it!" And
Yeah,
so I remember I messaged Ro on Facebook, and I messaged my other buddy that I used to work with at Avalanche on Discord, and I was like, "Guys, you're not gonna believe this. This thing right here is a node. It's not the 3D view. It's insane." Like, just the fact
Dude,
that they did that is incredible. Um,
it's the iteration as well, like in comparison. So like just for the this is like production context. I had like I make a ton of like a bunch of patterns,
mhm.
and I was basically trying to work out which pattern to go with. So I just literally plugged the node in, had a switch at the beginning of my graph to control the tile type. I was literally just like switch the tile, save, press the switch tile, save, and it was super quick.
Well,
And I had like 15 examples, all with the exact same lighting, the exact same perspective, exact same tiling, and I was like, okay, that's kind of scary how good that was. Like
I
it just
mean,
felt good.
think about it too in terms of if you're a large studio, like say someone like Activision, who I'm sure has thousands of materials in their library, right? Like,
Hmm.
think about for them if they could write a batch tool which just adds an output node, connects the 3D view, and spits out a preview image for every material inside their library. So, like, when you hover over a
James,
folder, it
why are
shows
you
the
giving
image.
people ideas?
Yeah, I was gonna say
Stop it.
you guys, Joe, you two are gonna be the one
Stop
doing
it.
it.
Stop it. Stop
Think about it.
giving people ideas.
Think about it.
I'm sure they thought about it already. But
Not
yeah,
hard
it's
enough.
definitely that would be a cool thing. I'm kind of jealous because I know about it, I've seen it, but I haven't played with it because I just don't have the time.
Yeah, it's super
I've become a manager. Yeah.
fun.
I mean, don't get me wrong with it. Like, if I'm gonna do my beauty shots, I'm still gonna take them into Unreal Engine, and I'm still gonna because you can't do so like with Marmoset when you can drag on the HDRI and add new directional lights and stuff. You can't do any of that, but like it with the render node, like you can change the tone map you're using. You
Mm,
can control a lot of it. You just don't have that specific like local control, which is I can imagine them adding that exact thing that is in Marmoset right now, that the drawing over the HDRI to draw new lights. I would not be surprised if in another update that render node gets something along them lines, and then that's it. That's me done with Marmoset.
mm.
Sorry, James.
uh, yeah, okay. Suit
What
yourself, pale.
what about so just to come back to sort of the kind of stuff we want to see from designer going forward. There's one
Yeah.
idea I'm thinking about. Since like on bigger open world games, we spend so much time making trim sheets and working in trim sheets.
Mm,
Um, when you first hear about designer, so like coming from when you do like ZBrush or whatever, they tell you as a designer, like holy shit, that smells like magic. Like until you understand it. Obviously, when you start to understand it, it's like great, you get it. I can imagine a tool. I still want to see a tool where like it's just designed for like making trim sheets and then applying trim sheets to the geo, and like it's just super like you sort of away from the UV unwrap to like thing because the UV unwraps are so tedious. Like having to make sure it's facing the right way, strips, made it stripped to
right.
straight, all this kind of stuff. You imagine like if you had like a fountain or a pillar, and it's just like literally just select the ring, apply, and like it does all the tedious shit in the background for you.
I
Um, you're gonna tell me this exists?
I think it's in Blender. I think it's
Yeah.
Decal Machine.
Yeah, it's decal
Oh,
machine,
decal
basically.
machine. Okay, yeah,
Yes. I don't know if it works necessarily. I'm sure it works for custom map inputs, but
it
I
does.
know it works for like their preset libraries and stuff. But yeah, just another one of those awesome Blender plugins.
And it actually
Yeah.
like it works in production as well, so you could bake it out into a unique if you wanted to as well. Which like at first was my limitation for it. I was like, I don't know if I'd use this because if I wanted to make a unique hard surface thing, I can't really use
Right.
this. And then he tweeted like, no, actually you can. And I was like,
I
oh,
didn't know
Yeah.
you could. Huh. I'll have
yeah,
to try
Yeah.
that. Okay.
I mean, one of the interesting things about that actual conversation is basically, yeah, there's it's funny because yeah, we get these raw tools, that we buy off, these separate companies, but the fact is they have so many ways to mod them. So the 343 tools are basically like I'm not going to go into specifics, but we have tools,
mm-hmm.
and it makes our lives easier. Same in the when I was at Naughty Dog, yeah, tools makes our life easier, and it's tools that that basically are not out there. They could, some other company could have done some other tool that's similar to that, right?
Mm-hmm.
We don't know because I'm not in that company, right? But the fact is that we make these tools based on production to make our lives easier, In some cases, we do have like, a trim sheet maker or something like that.
Hmm.
And those are dependent on like, oh, if we do these trims, over and over and over again, then we have something that we develop to make our lives easier. And that's how it is with a lot of that kind of production stuff, uh, and at times, algorithmic being algorithmic and owning stuff that people make, they kind of like see stuff and they're like, that's interesting, let me take it, and it magically gets into substance. So, there's some cases where it's actually like, oh my god, that's actually a tool that was from this one company kind of thing.
Yeah.
That's happened before for sure, to some degree. Um, so it's interesting to see that development. It's kind of like the community is the one that feeds all this stuff, and that's probably one of the biggest, I guess, positives that I would give for substance. Community is that we're really good about feeding each other. Um,
Yeah.
as opposed to other. It's kind of like ZBrush. Like the ZBrush community is just gorgeous because you go in there and there's so many content you can download, buy, and or tutorials, and
Is
some
that the
for
art community at large?
yeah, it's all the art community, right? So it's
Mm.
it's it's interesting to have that support. And with other tools, you don't necessarily get that all the time. Blender it's growing a really strong community, and through that community, it's becoming a connection point, right?
Yeah.
And and in some cases obsessive, but but it's good, because that means that people are proud of it and love working with it, and it means that in that way it's a good tool, and it gets people interested, and that's it.
It has it's figures of Blender. It has the best fans. It also has the worst fans. Like
Yeah.
it's. I mean, I've only jumped on the bandwagon like last year. But it. I don't know whether it's like if you get a car and you see your car everywhere because you notice it. I don't know whether it's just I'm noticing the behavior more now because I use Blender. But I'm like, I see on someone will just post an issue on Twitter, like a genuine issue with Max or Maya or whatever or Modo, and so I was like, yeah, well, Blender could do it like this, and I'm like, oh, come on,
See, like,
come on, like Blender's good, and I love Blender, and I'll preach it to the high heavens, but don't be a douche about it. Come on, like let people use their thing and don't preach to them about what is good. Like I said, if anyone ever asks me, like, oh, like how would you tackle this? I go, so, well, I'll use Blender because Blender has this great tool to do this. But it has both the best and worst community in my opinion, just because
like
people are so
Yeah.
proud.
it's funny with the car analogy too, because like I almost feel like sort of like Maya's almost like the Toyota Corolla, like it gets the job done
Hmm.
and it does what it needs to do. And then Blender is almost like a Ford Mustang or something. All the guys that drive Ford Mustangs are always tweeting about their Ford Mustangs and always wearing their shirts. It's the same with Blender.
Yeah,
Like, there's not a day that I've gone into the office and not heard someone being like, "Oh, dude, you got to try Blender. You got to switch to Blender. I use Blender." And just everyone that uses Blender is almost like a salesperson in a sense.
Yeah.
yes,
And I've become that too. Um, and it's just funny to see like how people once they start using it are just like the biggest supporter of that new software. And I haven't seen it with anything other than like Substance, like I was saying. Like
Yeah.
yeah.
it's just a
It
really funny thing to watch.
it's hilarious because the funny thing as well is like because I've had this. So for example, Michael Kinsey taught me when I was a Decagon, and I know he taught people like Taylor Brandenburg, and we there's it kind of spreads, and he doesn't even need to preach it because we preach it. But the thing I find kind of interesting with it is it 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 went from being a meme. Like that's the
Yeah.
thing I find. It's like the underdog, and
Yes.
there's certain artists who are so there's artists who are in their sort of bubble who never they know how they do stuff and they're never going to change, and it's like. And they still think of it as the meme, and it's like, no, dude, no. Okay, Blender deserves respect now. Like, it is up there. It's just as good, if not better, than some of the other packages.
it's
Like,
just
it's not the meme anymore. But people still think of it as that because they just think of it from when it was 2008 and it was barely usable.
that is like how it always is though with software. I mean, like
Yeah.
I remember I used to think Substance Designer was a meme. Like when I did those panels, turned out it was a real workflow. Then I used to always joke about how I used to use Rhinoceros for modeling weapons, and that I'd take it into ZBrush. And now that's actually like one of the workflows that they do with different software fusion into ZBrush, but same
Do they?
concept. Oh yeah, people are going like Fusion and then doing Dynamesh inside of
Oh,
ZBrush. Like
yeah.
that's
Sorry,
like
actually,
what
yeah. The one knows
a
I
bunch of
mentioned.
people are doing that. Yeah, like
Yeah.
I mean that's like a great workflow. And I mean it's Blender used to be a meme. I remember I used to always tease a kid that used it in high school. And then now I'm using it. It's like
A nerd
Yeah.
teasing a nerd. I like it.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, tools go through that. I mean, even ZBrush went through that. People just don't remember, but ZBrush it looked like a plaything early days. It was like, oh, here's a little toy that you can make sea depth paintings with. It looked terrible, and then eventually it's like, oh my god, you can create Gollum. I mean,
Yeah.
it just went from almost that to like Lord of the Rings. It's just like,
Dude,
come on, dude.
why did it take them so long to fix that gizmo? What was that gizmo? That
You
thing
mean
was
the
that.
you mean the translate? They finally got the translate correct.
Yeah, well, it's before it was like that line you drew out, and then you like grab it in different places to do different things, and that
Oh
like
god.
really held me back for so long in ZBrush. And then like they fixed the gizmo. I was like, hey, it's like the gizmo everyone knows. Yeah, we're now standardized a little bit, guys. Good job.
Yeah,
That's one of the best update I think I had for ZBrush.
Yeah, man.
yeah,
This
it's
industry
insane.
just changes so fast. It's nuts. Like
Yeah, and it's hard to keep up, and to some degree, I mean, if you're not like super active with it, it just changes right under you. And
Yeah,
that's the truth. So yeah, to be in this industry, you have to be aware of what's happening. Even the things that you think are going to be only fads can become an actual workflow later on, and you have to keep informed and basically explore here and there. And that's the thing. I think if anybody enters this industry and doesn't like the idea of exploration and art and seeing different things, then you're kind of in the wrong industry, because you have to be that kind of mindset that you're just going to explore, explore, explore.
yeah.
Um,
Because I say that in all my talks, that's one I have a slide where like, we do a lot of uni talks this year before the world ended. Where I say you have to be if you come into this industry, you have to be you want to learn.
yeah,
Like
yeah,
that's you're not going to ever stop learning, and it's actually it's a really interesting thing with you have to sort of keep an open mind as well because I learned this from like Chris Radsby and listen to him and Matthew Halloran talk about software. Like they'll bounce between both Modo, Max, Maya, and Blender, plus a host of other things because each one has strengths and they have weaknesses, and they're like, I'll use what gets the job done quickest to the best, best ability, and it's like that open mindedness, not because, like I said, we spoke about this like really early on in the podcast. That is, people can get tribalistic about their software. I mean, Blend, yeah, the Blender community show that more than anybody.
sure.
hey, don't hate on
Um,
Blender.
but the artists I see who are like, okay, I don't care what my tool is; it's where the tool gets. But I don't have a tool. Like, I have a toolkit of software, and I'll use which one is best for the situation. And I'm like, that kind of open mindedness to software, I think, is where not everyone's like that, but like I have a lot of respect for it because it's one is super challenging to be able to switch between software like that, and that's a real difficult thing to do. But them artists also are extremely efficient artists. Like I've seen sort of stuff Matthew could churn out in very short periods of time. It's like okay, there must be some method to the madness because I'm seeing him do it and it's working really really well.
Sure.
Um, this actually, I was gonna ask. This is. I'm sorry. This is going to be more aimed at James because you're a Blender dude.
Hmm.
Um, what do you think? So I've heard mumblings from the Blender community about. So we're going to talk about like hard ups or decal machine or mesh
Yeah, I
machine in
haven't
general.
I haven't used them very much, but I can try to comment on it.
Well, it's more of a principle thing.
Yeah.
So we were saying before about people have to be willing to accept new things. That Blender isn't a meme anymore. I feel like the old vanguard of Blender community also needs to accept that Blender's becoming a commercial product for artists to use. So Mesh Machine, for example, he tells the right to download his tools.
Right.
Now I hear mumblings of everything should be free because Blender's free and it's open source and that is bad and they are not
Mhm.
supporting what Blender was about.
Sure.
Now, I'm a very so okay, I'm a greedy pig. Like I like money. I get it's like if I put work in, I want to be paid,
Right. Yeah.
and I'll monetize
Sure.
stuff if I can. So I'm on that side of the fence. I'm like, you know what? Do what you want. You want to make money, you make money.
Yeah, there's time for it. I mean, I consciously early in the days, I consciously basically made a lot of my things free, and that was in the interest of. It, it sounds like I was doing it for people, but it was actually for me. The reality is, it was in part, is something that I was doing actively with concentrated effort to spread my work and also I guess you could say my name out in the industry. So it was an active thing, right? I had some calculation in that, right? And I said, well, I'm going to do this. I'm going to do these tutorials. I'm going to do these things. I'm going to, do some of that stuff, get my name out, be very dedicated for, these coming 2-3 years on, in community and be really active. And it was calculated, obviously, but it benefits the community, right? As well.
Mm.
So there's obviously, as an artist, you want to, you do want to help out the community, but there's also moments where you're like, yeah, if you work hard on it, then you should be well paid for it. I mean, at some point, I took on the Nomon tutorial that is now ancient history, right? It's like, you know, it's the oldest, one of the oldest substance tutorials. That's pretty useless at this point, um, I would say. But it's still being downloaded. I'm still technically getting paid for it, which is kind of funny and ridiculous.
Yeah.
So I'm still getting, the occasional like $200, $300 monthly for it. So people are still seeing it, and I would hope they're finding value in it, right? In the beginning, of course, it was quite a bit more, which was nice. And but when I started that, I was like, well, okay, I want to make a really cohesive tutorial that is gonna cover quite a bit of stuff for the current designer, right? Basically, a primer for anybody who wants to enter it. So the thought process was like, yeah, I'm gonna do it for the community, but this is gonna be a really massive tutorial. I do really want to get paid for it, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I, through contacts, I got contacts with Desi from Christoph Desi from Naughty Dog. He's the one that had the contact, and he's like, "Hey, you want to do this?" I was like, "Yeah, I want to do this," because he was going to do the painter one. So he released the painter one first, and I released the designer one after him, and then that basically popped up like almost at the same time. His was first, mine was second, and he did really well on his. I did pretty damn well on mine too. So, uh, but it was in the guys that like, yeah, we want to do this because we love these tools, right? And we want
Mm-hmm.
to spread it out. But this is definitely going to be more like something that is a bigger project, and we do need. I do believe that you need to get paid for it. Now, a Blender, the whole thing, I guess. I don't know this artist you're talking about. Actually, I have no reference. But if you're dedicated and you make content that is not just like one or a few assets, then and it took time, you should get paid for it. Like I don't understand the whole like you know situation where like oh everything should be free and open source. So I'm like this is kind of
It's
weird.
Well, it's
It
not. It's not so much
depends.
a feely thing. It's also it is in the sort of like license agreement with Blender. It's like so what they do is that to get around it, you download the right. You buy the right to download the product.
Yeah.
You're not actually buying the product,
right.
which leads on to this whole other like mess that technically. So say for example, I buy a product, I can send it to James or you.
Sure.
I'm not breaking any agreements. I've downloaded the right to buy it, but I can still distribute it. Now,
Right.
obviously, that's not supporting the guy, and I'm like, you support the people who make these tools.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
a really weird place, like the Blender, like because, like I said, you have to release things for free.
Yeah.
You can't sell an asset, but you could sell the right to download an
I've
asset. It's a super grey area.
Well, I mean, it's still technically your intellectual property. So I don't think they can technically legally enforce that. because it's still your intellectual artistic property that your design, your a tool or code that you build that that's not necessarily tied with Blender because Blender does not own, I don't know what code they use, whatever. I'm not a coder, but they don't own all that stuff, so they can't rightfully do that. So I would be like, yeah, they probably can't enforce that, and neither should they. It's just that it doesn't seem logical.
Yeah, I
Or they
remember.
should get paid for their work.
I do
Hmm.
remember a while back, when I was at a certain company and they were trying to make something for Blender, and they did end up having a lot of issues with that licensing because of that
Hmm.
clause. And I I get it from an open source standpoint, and I really respect um, Blender for releasing as open source because I think that we need more software like that. Although I think for like authors creating content for Blender, I think if it's a useful product that you're making, that you should get rewarded for it. Um, and I mean, from the standpoint of if you're using their product and you feel that it should be free, um, there's not anything against that. But if you're saying that a product should be free that you're using and then you're turning around and selling the assets for a profit, then I think you're um, you're kind of contradicting yourself there because
Yeah.
I think if you're saying that all the tools you use should be absolutely free, then you should release all that stuff for free. And I think that's kind of the thought with like Autodesk for like, let's make a free student software, but the students cannot sell their work legally, right?
Yeah.
And that I'm pretty much all for. I mean, the thing with Blender is that um, I'm not so supportive of the licensing for necessarily is that they're
Yeah,
making a lot of money from companies that donate to their software.
Yeah.
And I think that what it should be is that creators that are making a tool, and I think it might be like this, I think it's treated as like a donation or something to that creator for a tool that they make. Um, and I think that's pretty much up to the artist. If you're using the tool, like you should donate. Like I always pay for all my plugins or software,
Mhm.
unless it's like something super mundane, or if it's something like on Gumroad where it's free but it's not really free because like they're taking your email, like that sort of a thing. There's always a little workaround. Like nothing's ever really free, other than a couple things. But I mean, yeah, it's Blender is making a lot of money, and I mean, if you're creating content which is promoting their software and making them more money, you should be rewarded for that as well. But
Yeah.
that's my kind of thought
yeah.
on it. Um,
And again, companies have to be really careful of how much they want to control
Mm.
basic laws, especially in the United States, but laws that are based on intellectual property, based on artist rights, and all that kind of stuff. They can get into a very gray area. Well, eventually, an artist, a single artist or a group of artists could actually be like, hey, we're gonna go against that and actually sue you for that. That could happen really easily with a lot of these kind of weird clauses they put in to
Well,
try to control artists.
I'll give them credit. They haven't tried. So if I know on a company scale, there's been a couple of issues, like with
Yeah,
companies doing stuff and Blender having issues. On an individual level, so people like Hard Ops or Decal Machine or Mesh Machine, as far as I'm aware, they've been okay. Like they haven't really bothered them. Um, but I think it's going to also be more of a market thing. Like because the market
mm,
dictates success. So if you piss off your market and be obnoxious and annoying with like licensing and all that kind of stuff, your market just goes somewhere else. Like you annoy them enough, they'll just
yep,
leave.
exactly.
The market will dictate your own success.
I mean, it would be similar if like, well, every single tutorial that is made for an art station that or product that's being put in for like a substance or painter, then they're gonna get some kind of weird royalty on it or something because they kind of own it. I
Mm.
know they own maybe the code that's embedded into all that stuff, but it's still your intellectual property. You can't they can't possibly enforce that kind of stuff, and they won't because they're smart enough to not do that. But that's the kind of thing. Like there are artistic rights, and we need to enforce them. We need to know them, and we need to protect them. And that's one of the things that artists get really trapped in really early on. They don't know, what going to very simple things like when you're first contracting, when you're first entering as a intern, I've seen some artists get stuck in internships, yet they're doing, associate level art. And internships, you technically are not supposed to be, by the law, you're not supposed to be doing anything that's related to the actual production of the company. It's more like a learning situation.
Hmm.
But they abuse that, VFX companies and gaming companies all over the place. They tend to abuse that kind of stuff, and those are things that young artists and even experienced artists need to be really careful and cognizant of. It is that this industry is ripe for abuse, and you have to
Yeah.
protect yourself, and nobody's going to do it for you. Occasionally you're going to get people who are experienced and are in the right position to protect others, but generally you're not going to have that kind of situation. You're going to have a situation where you're the only one who's protecting you.
Mm.
Sorry, I went on a tangent there, but
No,
that's
that's
another
good.
thing. It's kind of
Right.
it's one of those things that it's difficult for artists to understand that no, it's not just a hobby and a thing that we do on the side. This is a profession, and it should be respected thusly. It's like
Mm.
I've developed since I was a very young age to be this. It's like it's the same as a musician. It's the same as a doctor. It's just that I chose to be in the arts. And it should be respected like that.
That's actually so. That's a great title to all this because we unfortunately we're gonna have to wrap up soon. But I think that's actually probably a really good sort of finishing point for artists to listen to, just because you know, like I said, people get stung by this, and although this is an industry people want to work, and it is like I said, ripe for being exploited. Only because as well is it's an industry based on people's passion, and I think that's what gets abused the most. Like I'm
Hmm.
so desperate to work in games that some people they consciously know they're being mistreated or taken advantage of. They're like, yeah, but I get to work on games, so like it's okay. So that's a very sort of important final note. But guys, I know you guys are busy, and these time zones are kicking our ass. I really appreciate you taking the time to come on. I've really enjoyed speaking to you both again.
Yeah, man.
And I think I'm gonna have to do this more often, having a couple of folks on. It's nice having the sort of a freeway conversation. Um, so yeah, huge thank you everyone listening. Remember, if you want to support the podcast, go to the Patreon. Anything that you support with goes back into making the podcast better and making the production better. But James, Rogelio, thank you so much, guys. It's
Yeah,
been a
thanks,
pleasure.
man.
Yeah, it's always been a pleasure, man. Yeah, all the conversations and everything, it's all been great.
All right, peace out, guys.